At 7:43 in the morning at Washington Dulles International, a narrow-body twin-engine jet accelerates down runway 19 center and climbs at an angle that looks wrong for a commercial airliner. The nose pitches up steeper than a 737. The climb rate is more aggressive than a 777. Passengers in the cabin feel themselves pressed into their seats like the aircraft is running from something. It's not running. It's just a Boeing 757 doing what the 757 does. Destination: Dublin, Ireland. Flight time: 7 hours, 30 minutes. Twin-engine narrow body, flown by United, carrying roughly 176 passengers and their luggage across 3,140 nautical miles of open ocean. Here's the part that doesn't make sense. Boeing stopped building this aircraft on October 28, 2004. The last 757 rolled off the assembly line in Renton, Washington, 21 years ago. 1,050 of them were ever built. No new airframe has been produced since then. No successor has been launched. No competitor aircraft has matched its full capability envelope. And yet, United Airlines will operate this exact route 529 times in 2026, because nothing else in production can fly it profitably. This is the story of the aircraft Boeing killed, the replacement program Boeing abandoned, and the competitor Airbus built to fill the gap. None of it has worked. The 757 is still flying because the replacement for the 757 does not exist. And the companies that should have built it spent the last 2 decades looking the other way. Rewind to 1980. Boeing is riding high on the 727, the best-selling narrow body of its era. 1,832 units were built between 1963 and 1984. Every major airline in the world operates them. But the 727 is a 3-engine jet. Fuel prices have quadrupled since the 1973 oil crisis. Airlines want something more efficient. Boeing needs a narrow-body replacement. At the same time, the company is developing a wide-body twin jet called the 767 for medium-haul routes. The engineers make a decision that will shape the next 40 years of commercial aviation. They designed the 757 and the 767 in parallel, with shared cockpit architecture, shared systems philosophy, and a common type rating for pilots. Eastern Airlines and British Airways sign as launch customers. First flight was February 19, 1982. Entry into service was January 1, 1983 with Eastern. The 757 is born. Then something unexpected happens. The 757 turns out to be wildly overpowered for its size. Each of its 2 engines produces up to 43,000 pounds of thrust. That gives the airframe one of the highest thrust-to-weight ratios of any commercial airliner ever certified. The only faster-climbing civilian jet ever built was the Concorde. A fully loaded 757 can lift off in approximately 6,500 feet of runway. It can climb directly to 42,000 feet. It can take off from airports at high altitude on hot days without payload restrictions. It can operate from short runways that would ground most aircraft in its capacity class. Pilots start calling it the sports car. They are not exaggerating. On a cool day at a sea-level airport with a light load, a 757 takeoff roll looks closer to a military fighter than a passenger liner. Airlines figure out something the engineers had not fully anticipated. The 757's combination of range, takeoff performance, and single-aisle economics opens up an entirely new category of flying: long and thin. Routes that were too long for narrow bodies and too small to justify a wide body. Boston to Dublin, Washington to Lisbon, Denver to Hawaii, New York to Manchester. Before the 757, if you wanted to fly from a mid-sized American city directly to a mid-sized European city, you connected through a hub. After the 757, you just boarded a narrow body and flew direct. By the late 1990s, the 757 has reshaped transatlantic flying. Icelandair built its entire business model around it. American carriers use it to open secondary European markets that would never support a wide-body. Delta, United, Continental, American. Everyone has them. Everyone depends on them. And then Boeing kills it. Here's what actually happened. In 1999, sales of the 757 started declining. The original launch customers had been fleet renewed. New orders dropped to a trickle. Boeing kept the line open, hoping for a recovery. In 2003, the recovery was not coming. Continental Airlines had been one of the last remaining active customers. In October of that year, Continental announced it was canceling its remaining 757-300 orders and switching to the smaller Boeing 737-800. Boeing did the math. With only 5 new orders across the entire sales campaign for the year, the program was bleeding money. Boeing announced the end of 757 production in October 2003. The final aircraft, the 1050th, rolled off the Renton line on October 28, 2004, destined for Shanghai Airlines. It was delivered more than a year later, on November 28, 2005, after sitting in storage. Boeing's reasoning at the time was defensible. The 757 market had matured. The 737 family could cover shorter routes. The 767 could cover longer ones. Why keep a narrow body with overlapping capability in production? There was one problem. Nothing in the Boeing lineup actually overlapped with what the 757 could do. The 737-800 could not match its range. The 767 could not match its economics. The 757 sat in a performance niche all its own. And Boeing had just walked away from that niche with no plan to return. If you are still watching, you are either wondering how an aircraft manufacturer abandons a segment they were dominating, or you already know Boeing has a pattern of doing exactly that. Either way, hit subscribe. This channel breaks down the real decisions behind the aircraft you fly on. No speculation, no hype, just what happened. Boeing's first attempt to cover the gap wasn't a new aircraft. It was an extension of an old one. The 737, originally designed in the 1960s, had been stretched, re-engined, and updated through multiple generations. By the 2010s, Boeing decided the answer to the post-757 question was to extend the 737 one more time. The result was the 737 MAX family, announced in 2011, with a first flight in 2016. On paper, the MAX 9 and eventually the MAX 10 were supposed to cover routes previously flown by the 757. Similar passenger capacity, better fuel efficiency, updated avionics. In practice, the MAX was not a 757. The fuselage was based on a 1960s design. Ground clearance was limited. The new, larger, more efficient engines would not fit under the wings the way Boeing wanted, so the engineers mounted them further forward and higher. That changed the aerodynamic behavior of the aircraft. To compensate, Boeing installed a software system called MCAS that would automatically push the nose down in certain flight conditions. MCAS failed. 2 737 MAX 8 aircraft crashed within 5 months. Lion Air Flight 610 in October 2018. Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 in March 2019. 346 people died. The aircraft was grounded worldwide for nearly 2 years. Boeing's strategy to cover the 757 gap with a warmed-over 737 had just produced the worst commercial aviation crisis in the company's history. The MAX 10, the variant actually intended to match 757 capacity, would be delayed by years. Even when it was eventually certified, its range and hot and high performance still did not match what the 757 could do out of the box in 1983. Meanwhile, Boeing had been working on an actual 757 replacement. It was called the new mid-size airplane. Unofficially, the 797. The concept was announced around 2015, a clean sheet design, twin aisle or narrow body, depending on which iteration you were looking at. 220 to 270 seats, a range of 4,500 to 5,000 nautical miles. Designed specifically to replace the 757 and the 767, more than 50 airlines gave positive feedback, including Delta, United, Qantas, and Emirates. Boeing planned entry into service for around 2025. Then the MAX crisis hit. The company's engineering resources, cash reserves, and executive attention all pivoted to recertifying the grounded 737 MAX. The NMA program was put on hold. Rolls-Royce, which had been developing engines for the program, publicly withdrew in 2019, stating that its UltraFan engine was not ready on the timeline Boeing needed. By early 2020, the new midsize airplane program was officially paused. It has not been restarted since. The 797 that was supposed to replace the 757 exists today as a set of canceled blueprints and a handful of engineering studies, nothing else. Airbus, watching all of this happen, made a different decision. The A321, an Airbus narrow-body launched in 1994, had been steadily evolving. In 2016, Airbus launched the A321LR, a long-range variant with a range of 4,600 nautical miles. On June 17, 2019, at the Paris Air Show, while Boeing was consumed by the MAX crisis, Airbus announced the A321XLR, extra long range, a maximum range of 4,700 nautical miles, later extended in some configurations to roughly 5,400 statute miles. 11 hours of flight time. The market response was brutal. By the time the A321XLR entered commercial service in 2024, Airbus had accumulated more than 550 orders. United Airlines, one of the largest 757 operators in the world, ordered 50 of them to start replacing its aging fleet. American Airlines, which never operated the 757 but saw the opportunity, placed its own orders. Air Canada, JetBlue, Iberia, Wizz Air, and dozens of others followed. For the first time in 20 years, an aircraft was commercially available that could do most of what the 757 did. Most. The A321XLR is more fuel efficient than the 757. It burns 15 to 30% less fuel per seat, depending on the mission profile. It has longer maximum range. It has modern systems, LED lighting, better cabin pressurization. For pure transatlantic operations from sea-level airports in temperate weather, it is a genuine improvement. But the 757 was never just a transatlantic aircraft. Consider Denver to Lihue, Hawaii. Denver International sits at 5,430 feet of elevation. Summer temperatures routinely exceed 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The flight is long, the payload is full. These conditions compound to make the takeoff environment aerodynamically punishing. At hot and high airports, air density drops, which reduces engine thrust, reduces lift generation, and forces runway length calculations that most aircraft cannot meet with a full load. The 757 shrugs at Denver in July. Its thrust-to-weight ratio and wing design give it the margin to lift its full passenger load and reach Hawaii non-stop on days when other narrow bodies would face severe payload restrictions. The A321XLR cannot match that. Analysis from industry sources indicates the XLR would face significant payload or performance restrictions on Denver to Hawaii in hot summer conditions. United Airlines has publicly stated it does not plan to transition the Denver to Lihue route to the A321XLR. The airline will either keep flying the 757 on that route, replace it with the wide-body 787, or discontinue it entirely. This is not an isolated case. The 757's combination of thrust, wing design, and takeoff performance means that there are routes across the airline industry where the aircraft has no real substitute. Certain Latin American airports with short runways, high-altitude South American destinations, specific African operations, niche, but profitable routes that depend on that sports car thrust ratio. Now look at what's actually happening in fleets today. Delta Airlines is the world's largest 757 operator. At the end of 2023, Delta flew 127 757s. By late 2025, that number had dropped to roughly 92. Delta retired 23 757-200s in 2025 alone, more than double the previous year. Daily round-trip 757 flights across Delta's network fell from 338 in December 2024 to 250 a year later. 9 U.S. cities lost 757 service entirely. United Airlines still operates 61 757s with an average age of 24 years. Deliveries of its 50 A321XLRs began in December 2025. On paper, that's a replacement. In practice, United will keep flying 757s on specific routes where the XLR can't match the performance for years to come. FedEx, the largest cargo operator of the type, took delivery of its first 757 freighter in 1987. At its peak, FedEx operated over 120 757 freighters. In June 2024, the company retired 22 of them in a single announcement, taking a $157 million impairment charge. As of mid-2025, FedEx still operates roughly 90 757 freighters. UPS operates its own fleet of 757 freighters, also inherited from decades of service, also being gradually retired as the economics of older airframes catch up with newer, more efficient freighters, like the 767F. So where does that leave commercial aviation today? The 757 is in managed decline. Passenger operators are transitioning to the A321XLR, where the performance envelope allows, and to wide bodies, like the 787, where it does not. Cargo operators are transitioning to the 767F and the 777F. Retirements are accelerating, but the aircraft refuses to disappear. The reason is simple. The A321XLR gets you most of the way on efficiency and range, but it cannot match the hot and high or short field performance. The 787 matches the range easily, but the economics do not work on a 170-seat route. The 737 MAX 10 has similar capacity, but not the range or the takeoff performance. Boeing's management bet 21 years ago that the 757 segment was too small to justify continued production. They were wrong. The segment is still there. The routes are still profitable. The aircraft Boeing chose not to replace is still paying for itself every time a United pilot pushes the throttles forward at Dulles. And here's the part that makes the story worse. The 797 that was supposed to replace the 757 is now further from existence than it was in 2015. Boeing's capital is consumed by the 737 MAX recertification, the 777X delays, and quality control failures across multiple production lines. Industry analysts do not expect a launch decision on a clean sheet mid-size aircraft before the mid-2030s. Service entry would be somewhere in the 2040s, if it happens at all. By that point, most of the remaining 757s will be in the desert, retired, scrapped, converted to freighters if the airframe condition allows. The routes they opened will still exist, but they will be flown by compromises. A 321 XLR aircraft pushing the edges of its performance envelope, Boeing 787 aircraft flying at fractions of their capacity. Connections reintroduced on city pairs that had direct service for 40 years. Every time a passenger boards a 757 between now and then, they are boarding an aircraft that its manufacturer decided was not worth replacing. An aircraft that its competitor tried to replace but could not fully match. An aircraft that has outlasted 3 US presidents, 2 major recessions, the 9/11 crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic, and an entire generation of aviation executives. Boeing built this aircraft in 1982. The company decided to stop building it in 2003. Every year since then, the airlines that operate it have asked a version of the same question. What flies when these are gone? Nobody has answered. The 757 keeps flying because the answer does not exist.
And somewhere in Renton, Washington, on the factory floor, where the last 757 was built, a different aircraft is being assembled today. A different aircraft with a different problem. A program that was supposed to be Boeing's comeback. A program that instead became one of the most troubled commercial aircraft developments in modern history. You have probably flown on it. You might fly on it next week. Its story is about to make everything you just heard about the 757 look like a warm-up.